Bam. Good morning and welcome to Worldwide Wisdom. What does the Torah say about a deal with Hamas? Would the Torah tell us? Last night I was at an event. It was an amazing experience. I was at an event where there was a hostage rescued from Gaza. His name was Russian guy. Oh yeah, I have his name. Russian guy. I forget exactly what his name was, but he was one of the hostages rescued from Gaza. Remember that in June last year when they asked him, were you exchanged or rescued? He said he was rescued. You remember Noor Gamani? It was Shabbos morning over here, and we heard the news. Noor Gamani was rescued with a daring operation. It was Operation Arnon, where they broke in. They found two homes that they knew that the hostages were located at 200 meters apart. And they came in, and they, with full fire, and they rescued these four hostages, not before the leader of the campaign was killed. His name was Arnon Zamora, real hero, and they named the operation after him in retrospect, just like Yoni Netanyahu Ventebi. So at this event, you saw the hostage get up on stage. Then you see one of the soldiers who fought in the rescue mission to rescue him. And then the parents of Arnon Zamora get on stage, bereaved parents. It was a very intense experience. And the question is, we were trying to get all the hostages back, right? We're trying to get all the hostages back. So now in Israel, I just came back from Israel, and people are saying, we've got to do everything, whatever it takes. We're going to do whatever it takes to bring the hostages back. Anything, whatever it takes. Yeah. And you talk to people in Israel, you talk to taxi drivers, and amazing what kind of philosophy you learn from taxi drivers. And they it's not so simple about just doing everything for the hostages. What about the families of the bereaved soldiers? Are you trying to tell me that my son died for nothing? When we went down to the southern border of Gaza just the other day, what's today, Friday? On Sunday night, we were on the southern border of Gaza, and it was an amazing experience. We were met by the general of the Southern Brigade. He gave us a special medal, which we're putting on a video. We're putting it together. Hopefully by Monday, we'll send it out to the community. But he gave us a medal for what we've done for the IDF, and he said to us something amazing. You guys were there, right? What did he tell us? He said that there's not a single brigade in the entire Israel Defense Forces that has not received a drone from the Chabad Palm Beach Gardens in the past 12 months. And he was saying Gaza, Lebanon, Judea and Samaria, and other places of non-disclosed details. He said there's not a single brigade in the entire IDF that did not receive a drone from the Chabad Palm Beach Gardens. It was an amazing experience. But I want to say to you, it was bittersweet for us. It was bittersweet. Here we were. We were what? How many feet from the fence of Gaza? A little too close for comfort, right? We were like, right there is hell. Like right there, right? We were literally, we're on top of a hill. They brought us on top of a hill. And they said, we want you to be there just for a very short time because it's too dangerous for you to stand there. And they pulled us down. So this is actually the unit that receives the hostages from the Red Cross. And they showed us the exact point where they received the hostages. They took a drone of ours, one of our drones, and they sent it over into Gaza, and we saw into the houses. It was amazing. But what was so interesting about this situation was that here we are, and 900 soldiers have died, giving up their lives so that we could have the freedom to operate inside of Gaza. But now what? Now we're waiting on the outside. We've given it up. So all that they've died for, nothing. Tragic. So you got 250 hostages, 900 soldiers died. Which one is more important? What does the Torah have to tell us about the deal with Hamas? Does the Torah want us to make a deal with Hamas? Or does the Torah say, absolutely not? What do you think?
It says you never give up land you never cede land once you've taken it.
You never cede land to your enemies once you've taken it. That's exactly right. But something else I want to tell you, your phone is ringing. So one thing I want to tell you is that this week's Torah portion is an amazing, amazing Torah portion. It's called Parshas Zachor. What does Zachor mean? Remember. What are we supposed to remember? We're supposed to remember never to forget. There's something serious going on over here. You're supposed to remember to never forget. What are you supposed to remember to never forget? To never forget to erase the memory of Amalek. Now, what's up, Amalek? Amalek? Who the hell is Amalek? I mean, seriously. What do you think? Why is this enemy of ours different to other enemies of ours? Why is this night, K-N-I-G-H-T, why is this night different to all other nights that he gets this special Torah portion once a year where Amalek has to be remembered to be erased? Why does he get a special Shabbos? What about the Greeks? I mean, the Greeks get a holiday. They get Hanukkah, fine. The Romans can't. The Romans got Tisha B'Av, fine. Egypt, they got a whole Passover. Fair enough. You know what? It's interesting. I'm glad I'm thinking this out loud. Egypt, they got a whole Passover. That's pretty intense. Okay, what else? Who else? Any other nemesis we had? Of course. Give me name a country. Yeah, who? Persia. Persia gets Purim. Okay. Persia gets Purim. Who else?
It's a good thing we don't have any more holidays. We have more enemies.
Every enemy gets a holiday, right?
Wasn't this Parsha because God gave a strict order to kill and they didn't follow?
This is my question, my friend. This is my question. Why is this one we're supposed to destroy? Amalek? Amalek is the nation that has to be destroyed. Absolutely destroyed. Man, woman, and child. We can't give them any place to live. And the question is, we don't deal like that with the Greeks or the Romans or the Egyptians or the Moabites or the Ammonites or the Crusaders or the Nazis. We don't deal with them like that. We don't deal with them. Well, only when it comes to Amalek we do this now. Steve is saying the reason is because they went after the weak. They went after the weak, seriously?
Yeah.
And the other guys didn't go after the weak?
Yeah, no respect for God.
They had no respect for God.
From behind.
What, did Nazis have respect for God?
So here's how the Rebbe explains it. The Rebbe explains it in Purim of 1965. You know, the Rebbe explains in Purim of 1965 that he quotes a medrash. The Rebbe quotes a medrash which tells us, explains to us anti-Semitism. It helps us understand anti-Semitism. What does the medrash say? It says that the story of Purim, which is the story of anti-Semitism, it's the story of Achashverosh, the king, who was solicited by his grand vizier, Haman, and he asks him to purchase the right to eliminate the Jews for 10,000 talents of silver, right? And what does Achashverosh say? You got a deal, but keep the change. It's okay, no problem. You keep the money, and you have my permission to God forbid, bring about this Holocaust, God forbid. So the Medrash gives us an example of what was going on. It's an example of a person who had a ditch in his field. What do you do when you have a ditch in your field? He wants to fill it in, right? But he didn't have the earth. So he was hoping to find someone who would give him the earth to put the ditch in his field. Meanwhile, there's a neighbor of his who has a mound in his field, right? And the mound guy is looking for someone who's going to take his dirt to cart it away. So one day they meet up. And the guy with the ditch says to the guy with the mound, would you mind allowing me to purchase from you your mound? The guy with the mound says, you know what? I'll give it to you for free. Thank you for taking it. In other words, you're doing me a favor for taking it. And it's of this that we can understand how anti-Semitism works, right? Does the Medrash explain to us anti-Semitism now? The mound and the ditch. I mean, do we need any explanations to understanding how anti-Semitism works? I mean, I think we've got very clear. We don't need analogies for things that are utterly obvious. What is the Medrash trying to teach us with this metaphor of the mound and the ditch? This is the question that the Rebbe is asking in 1965. It's like, why do we need a story about this? We know they hate us, they're trying to kill us, and thankfully we won. Finished. The Rebbe explains that we don't need any analogies to explain that they hate us. This we understand. What the analogy is doing is teaching us why they hate us. And what the analogy is telling us is that there's two kinds of anti-Semites. There's the anti-Semite of the mound, and there's the anti-Semite of the ditch. What's the difference? There's one kind of anti-Semite that is bothered by the Jew who's like blocking his view. The Jew's like a mound in his way. What happens if you have a mound in the middle of your field? Like, you're bothering me. I'm intimidated by you. Right? This is the anti-Semite that hates the Jews for a good reason. You know, because the Jews are multiplying too much in Egypt. This is what Pharaoh was worried about. He was worried that there was going to be a demographic time bomb, and that the Jews were going to multiply too much, and they're going to take over the country of the Democratic Republic of Egypt, of ancient Egypt. Right? That's what he was worried about. So he had a legitimate reason. The Jews were a thorn in his side. They were a mound in his view. They were blocking his pleasure. Same problem with the Greeks. Greeks had the same problem with the Jews. Why did the Greeks have a problem with the Jews? Because the Jews were studying a wisdom that made them uncomfortable. The Jews had this religion. They believed in faith. They believed in an invisible God. And the Greeks were not comfortable with that. They only believed in the hard and fast.
Except their gods were invisible too.
No.
Mount Olympus, the Greek gods on Mount.
No, they weren't invisible.
They had statues.
Yeah, all sorts of statues. The Jews talk about this invisible God. They're like, we talked about this oil being holy and this oil not holy. They were like, what are you talking about, guys? You're making me uncomfortable. Right? That's the Greeks. They were like, listen, all oil is good, okay? And we're going to open the bottle tops for you, right? And that's it. They weren't bothered by our culture, right? Romans, probably same thing.
What in 2025? What's the problem?
Hang on. Give me a hold. You put your seatbelt. Relax. Okay. So we're talking here about, the ancient Greek wisdom is inferior, right? They were worried that here they are, the philosophers, Socrates, Plato, Dante, Michelangelo, whatever, right? And what they worried about that the Jews were more intelligent than them. They're like, we don't want you guys studying stuff that we don't understand, right? We don't want you to study Torah. It makes us feel stupid. Right, so we don't want you to do that. They had a problem with that Torah. That's why they banned the Torah. They banned the bris. They banned all sorts of laws like Shabbos in the Jewish calendar that they were uncomfortable with. But then there comes a different kind of anti-Semite. The regular anti-Semite, the run-of-the-mill anti-Semite, is the Mound anti-Semite. He's the guy that says the Jews are bothering me. Okay, you can't fault this guy because at the end of the day, they do have a reason of why they don't like the Jews, right? Then you have a different kind of anti-Semite who's the ditch. What's a ditch? The ditch is, you're not bothering me. Your presence makes me feel empty. In other words, it's not anything you did. It's just your existence that makes me feel shallow. It makes me feel hollow. Who's this? This is Hitler. Nazis. What did Hitler say? Hitler said, this is in a book called Conversations with Hitler. The German author Hermann Rauschning, right, quotes Hitler by saying that Hitler hates the Jews because, quote, they invented conscience. They invented the conscience, the story of creation, and the value of the individual human being, unquote. That's why Hitler hated the Jews, because you make me feel uncomfortable, because now I suddenly have a guilty conscience. Right? You know who else is like this? The Arabs. Think about this, the Arabs. What do the Arabs want more? Do they want to establish their own state? When I say the Arabs, it's a very big term. Let's talk about the Palestinians, the so-called Palestinians, self-appointed, right? What do the Palestinians want? Do they want their own state, or do they want to destroy the Jewish state? What is more important to them?
Destroy the Jewish state.
How many times have they offered to have their own state? And what do they say? No, because they don't want the two-state solution. What they want is to destroy Israel. They don't want their own state. They want that Israel should not have a state. That's right. It's exactly right. They want to eliminate the Jews. Exactly right. So
and then in sequence, everybody else who's not a Muslim.
Oh yeah, the Jews come first. Canary in the coal mine. Right.
Everybody else.
But let's focus on one thing at a time here, Chuck. Let's take it slow here. You know what I mean? We gotta before we deal with the rest of the world, let's deal with anti-Semitism. Once we solve anti-Semitism, we'll deal with that. Hang on. The question is if the Jews get it, Mike. That's the big question. Do the Jews begin to understand what's going on here? Right? So folks, let's talk about this. So here you got the Arabs. You know what the Arabs have? It's quite amazing actually. The Arab people have what are they called? The Arabs. Okay, they have 5 million square miles of land, from like Qatar all the way through to Libya, Morocco, Algeria. Okay, you're talking about 5 million square miles of land. You know how much Israel land mass is?
Size of New Jersey.
The size of Israel's land mass is 8,500 square miles. 8,500 square miles. Compare 5 million square miles versus 8,500. It's 1 out of 500. It's 1/500th. 1/500th. It's 20% of 1%. The land mass of the land of Israel. And yet, this is the world's problem. We cannot tolerate the fact that you have a piece of a little incy-wincy, give me a little closet in the corner. That's all we're asking. No, too much, right? Because it's not that they want their own country. They already have their own countries. They got 22 countries. There's one Jewish country. No, too much. Here you're dealing with an anti-Semite that is not a mound, it's a ditch. It's not a problem that we don't like the Jews because the Jews are too smart, the Jews are too rich, the Jews are too brave, the Jews have beautiful wives, the Jews have happy marriages. That's not the problem. The problem is that the Jew makes them feel uncomfortable. That's it. And therefore, sorry, what are you about to say?
No, so the problem is that the Jew is a Jew.
Yeah. The problem is that the Jew exists. And this is Haman. This is Haman of the Purim story.
This is Amalek.
Who's Haman, by the way? Haman was a guy. His last name was Ha'agagi. Haman Ha'agagi. He was the Agagite. Who was Agagite? Agagite was his great-great-grandfather. Agag was the king of Amalek in the days of King Saul, right? And the prophet Samuel. King Saul was ordered by the prophet Samuel. You know the story, Jonah? From Mitzvah Boy? The prophet Samuel commanded the King Saul to execute every last Amalekite, man, woman, and child. And he didn't kill the animals, and who else didn't he kill? The king. And also he kept the woman alive and the children. So what happened was that the prophet Samuel was so upset. What? Yeah. It was the woman as well. Women and children as well. So what happened was that the king that night, the night before Samuel came in to inspect, and he was like, what's going on here? And when he realized that Saul had failed to fulfill the command, he told him the kingdom has been ripped away from you. It's going to be given to somebody better than you. That was ultimately going to become David. And Saul, the king, grabbed onto his cloak, onto Samuel's famous cloak, and he ripped it. So he said to him, just like you ripped my cloak, the kingdom will be ripped away from you. This King Agag, that night in the dungeon, he managed to impregnate a slave in the dungeon, and that seed ultimately became Haman, right? So Haman is a direct descendant of the Amalekite king, right? Haman is an Amalekite, right? So who's Haman? Haman is a guy that, why did he hate the Jews? That's what the Medrash is to come to tell us. Achashverosh was the Jew, was the anti-Semite of the Mound. Haman was the anti-Semite of the ditch. What bothered Achashverosh? He was like, yeah, whatever, the Jews are bothering me. He was intimidated by the fact that there was a prophecy that the Jews were going to return back to the land of Israel after 70 years. He was intimidated by the fact that he had a prophecy that the kingdom would rule after him. He got the dates wrong. But he was intimidated by the fact that he got a prophecy that the king who would rule after him on his throne was going to be a Jew. And what didn't he realize? His wife was Jewish. And therefore the next prince is going to be a Jew. Right? That's why the minute Esther tells Achashverosh, by the way, I'm a Jew, he was like, what the? Why don't you tell me that? He's like, okay, now I don't hate the Jews anymore. Done. Now let's hang Haman. Because he was like, okay, so I don't have a reason to hate the Jews, because he was a Mound. He just hated the Jews because he thought they were threatening his kingdom. That's all. Haman had no rational rhyme or reason, no explanation whatsoever as to why I hate the Jews, just because they make me feel uncomfortable. And that's why Haman comes in. And how does the Torah describe Haman? Ish tsar ve'oyev. A man who was tsar. Tsar means like narrow and hateful. Narrow and vengeful. Why does it mean that he was narrow? Like, what does that mean? The word tsar can also mean like oppressing and vengeful. But the literal meaning of the word tsar is that he was narrow. Why? Because the presence of Mordechai made him feel insignificant. That's it. He could not stand the sight of Mordechai. Everybody else is bowing down to him, but one guy is not. Too much. Made him feel uncomfortable. He's hurting my feelings. Is that a phone over there? Yana, can you turn the phone off if somebody's on the phone? Thanks. So this is Haman, the man who is intimidated by the Jews' mere presence. His approach to the Jews is one which was that of a ditch. And that's what the Medrash is explaining to us. It's an irrational hatred. And this is Amalek. Why is that Amalek? Because Amalek were the residents of the Gaza land. Amalek, when the Jews came out of Egypt, they're coming out of Egypt, crossing the Red Sea into the Sinai Desert, and then all the way up around Jordan and Syria into the land of Israel from the north, right? So they never went through Gaza. Gaza is where the Amalekites lived. The Amalekites came out of Gaza after the Jews had already broken free from Egypt, on their way to the land of Israel, not through Gaza, and they went in to attack the Jews. Why did they attack the Jews? Were they intimidated by the Jews for land? Were they afraid of the Jewish religion? No, they weren't afraid of the Jewish religion. You know why? There wasn't yet a Jewish religion. The Torah wasn't given yet. We're still a bunch of nomads, a bunch of Hebrews wandering through the desert, right? So they weren't even intimidated by our wisdom, like the Greeks or our culture or our traditions. They weren't. They were just, the Egyptians hated us because they were afraid of us, but the Amalekites had no rhyme or reason to hate us. That's what Amalek is, and that's the reason why the Torah tells us that when it comes to Amalek, when it comes to this kind of hate, you've got to erase them. You've got to do a root canal, and you cannot make a deal with this kind of animosity. When it comes to somebody who hates you for various reasons, okay, we can talk about it. We can go to therapy, and we can have a discussion. You want this, you want that. If it's about land, if it's about resources, about oil. But here with the Palestinians, you're dealing with such vengeful hate. We gave them a two-state. Gaza, we gave them, Ariel Sharon unilaterally withdrew from the Gaza Strip to give them a two-state solution. And this we're hearing from the new U.S. ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee. He was like, when he was asked recently about a two-state solution, he says, I don't believe in a two-state solution because we already tried that and it failed. That's what he said. Tried that and it failed. We gave them the Gaza Strip. They don't want a two-state solution, so that's not going to happen. So what then does the Torah tell us we have to do? The Torah tells us is that you're going to have to work on the Trump plan. That's what the Torah seems to be telling us. Get them out of here. You cannot keep such hatred next door to you because it's only a matter of time of when the next October 7th is going to happen, God forbid.
But the question is, at what price?
Oh, so the question is at what price? Well,
The lives of the hostages.
okay, so let's talk about the lives of the hostages for a second. How many hostages do we have left over there? Now, Israel is obviously still trying to get the hostages out. Maybe 30 something, right? How many Jews are at risk by keeping the hostages? By keeping Hamas on our doorstep? Is it 35 or is it 3.5 million, right? Or is it all the Jews in Israel, right? You cannot make that math. You cannot do it, and that's what the Torah is telling us. Listen, do whatever you can to get those hostages out alive. But what's going to happen now is that you're going to have to protect yourselves. You need to be able to call the enemy exactly what it is. They are not diplomats. They are not statesmen. These are bloodthirsty terrorists that sometimes dress in a suit. Okay, the United Nations came out yesterday with a report about some sort of crimes against humanity. Of course, there was a Palestinian girl that was killed by some bullet ricocheted from an IDF something. No mention of the Bibas brothers murdered. It talks about an analysis of the countries in the Middle East that are, violating human rights against children, right? God forbid, we don't talk about women anymore. Sexual violence, we don't talk about that because it's not appropriate. But when it comes to killing children, they figured out that there was one kid that was killed by IDF somewhere, right? But the Bibas brothers, no mention, nothing. Right?
What about
because I believe that the United Nations also are terrorists. They're terrorists in a suit.
Forget about Bibas brothers. What about on October 7th where they beheaded babies?
Of course, exactly right. And what you're talking about, the United Nations Secretary General, who refuses to this day to condemn the attack of October 7th. They refuse to acknowledge that it even happened. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. These are terrorists in a suit, to quote the Israeli ambassador at the United Nations. Right. And I think there's something to be said about kicking them out of the United States. So that's a different story. So it's not right now. Right now, what we learned from the Torah portion this week is that when there's an anti-Semite that hates you so much for no rhyme or reason, then that's an Amalekite that you got to get entirely out of here, and you cannot make a deal with such an entity. So when it comes to Hamas, there's no doubt that these are people who hate us for no reason. It's not about land. It's not about resources. They were given their land. They don't want their land. What they want is that we should no longer exist. We make them feel hollow. We make them feel shallow. We make them feel empty. We make them feel like a ditch. And that is the brilliance of what the Torah is teaching us in the commentary of the Medrash, explaining about what happened over here with regards to with Haman and Achashverosh, two kinds of anti-Semites. Haman asked Achashverosh to sell out the Jews. So Haman is coming as a ditch. Achashverosh is coming as a mound. So Achashverosh says, you know what? I'll give it to you for free because you're doing me a favor by taking away the Jews, because you're getting them out of the thorn out of my sides. They're bothering me, so you're getting out of the way. You don't have to pay for it. But for Haman, it was irrational. And when you look at anti-Semitism in general, in general, from an overview, it's interesting. Anti-Semites has existed under conflicting conditions. They've hated us when we were rich, and they've hated us when we were poor. They've hated us when we were the largest donors in philanthropy, and they hated us when we were on welfare, living in the tenements. They hated us when we were communists, and they hated us when we were capitalists. They hated us when we have a homeland. Shabbos. They hated us when we have a homeland, and then they hated us when we were homeless. Remember Helen Thomas?
Sure.
Helen Thomas?
Sure.
Yes, the White House reporter.
Yeah.
Wearing a red dress.
Yeah. So they hated us when we were homeless. Get out of our countries. Go to your land. And now we had our own land. No, you can't have your own land. Right? They hated us when we were assimilated. And they hated us when we were distinct and apart, observant of our own traditions and enclaves. Why? Because this is irrational. It's a hatred that is irrational, and the Torah is telling us this week that you cannot make a deal with such a devil. There's two different kinds of anti-Semites. To make a deal with Hamas is simply to kick the can down the road until, God forbid, the next atrocity. It is up to us to learn the lessons of history. And so we have this Shabbos every year, Shabbos before Purim, to remind us of the dangers of what leads to genocide. It's the tolerance of this kind of hatred. How do you feel about this message?
Spot
on. Beautiful.
on.
All right, questions?
What about in the United States, we have in the universities all these fools wearing their schmatters and whatever?
What does Bibi call them? Useless idiots? No, useful. He calls them useful idiots.
Well, that's a Russian term.
I thought Bibi said that to Congress.
No, that's a Russian term, useful idiot. I mean, that's for Trump. Whatever. But what do you
Yeah, I was in Vancouver.
Are those ramblers? Are those,
Look, I think those guys. I think those guys are getting paid.
What's that all of them?
Yeah, you know what? I think they're just anti-establishment. A lot of those guys. They don't even know what they're fighting for. Seriously, you ask them, river to the sea. Which river? Which sea? Why do you hate the Jews?
LGBTQ.
They don't know. They don't know.
I love that one. Yeah.
Can you imagine a world, by the way? I'm sorry. Imagine a world where we disbanded the United Nations and then recreated the United Nations with checks and balances. Can you imagine if we recreated the United Nations with checks and balances, just like we established the United States of America, where you wouldn't be able to have this bully diplomacy, where you rub my back, I'll rub yours, you support my dictatorship, then I'll support your dictatorship, where we create some sort of checks and balance system where they're not able to gang up against the smaller nations. Wouldn't that be such an interesting situation? I think that would be amazing. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
The speaker that we have from Saudi Arabia,
yeah,
he described it, I thought, perfectly. Said many people in the Arab world have never met a Jew, never had any interaction with the Jew, but hate the Jews. Why? Because their parents hated Jews, their grandparents hated Jews, because they thought about Jews. Now suddenly they need a Jew.
There you go. Not so bad.
Yeah, not so bad. You know what? What is all this nonsense that I was hearing? Whatever. That's the real.
You know, we're having a special.
You have
I've heard
indoctrinated.
that.
We're having a special guest.
And wait, and one final note on that. And he says it will take a generation or two after you've taken those.
But you chop off the head of the snake. The people that are indoctrinating and brainwashing,
Exactly.
like in Hamas right now, they're just brainwashing the children, and anybody who steps out of line is just eliminated.
Right.
You've got to get rid of this, and that's why what I think is so amazing about this Trump plan, as outrageous as it sounds, is that it's a total reset to an impossible situation. And it's the definition of insanity to believe that you can keep on trying the same thing over, the same two-state solution, and that it's going to have different results. It's not going to work. You know, they failed so many times. It's time for a paradigm shift.
What about the leadership in Qatar? I mean,
Qatar is terrorist as well.
Yeah, I understand, but what do you do with that? Say you really got rid of everything.
Keep Qatar out of the picture. I think we're going to get Hamas out of Israel's doorstep. That's it. I think we're going to find some island somewhere that that needs $100 billion and send them over there.
So let me ask you a question, though. What do you think? Well, you don't think that there's going to be all of these pictures of Jews being transported out of their shtetls in Eastern Europe, by the Nazis.
You made your bed.
Wait. When the Jews start to transport the Arabs out of Gaza.
Not at all.
and put
Not at
them
all.
somewhere
You
else?
made your bed, now you sleep in it. Okay. You turned Gaza into the hornet's nest of explosives. Okay. It's no longer safe to live there. You cannot live in. There's unexploded shells everywhere. There's rockets. There's RPGs. There's grenades under every little bed and children's bedroom. And there's tunnels. You can't live there.
You're missing that point.
Yeah. You
If
say
you're
it's not going to look good.
If
It's
you're
a
original,
visual. It's a
right?
visual.
It's a visual. Look, the biggest problem with the Israeli situation now is they should have totally bombed Gaza on day one.
That's right.
Dealt with the fallout.
Yes.
And then
I
done.
said that on day one. I want to tell you.
Yes,
I said on day one, you gave us Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
You know what comes next.
And
And I said on day one, I said
instead
the
of
amount of
1,000
soldiers that are going to fall, God forbid, rescuing these few hundred hostages is a travesty. And I said we got to be strong. At the end of the day, the Torah tells us those who are kind to the cruel will end up being cruel to the kind. If you cannot be cruel to the cruel, you will never be kind to the
So
kind.
you're suggesting not bombing them. You're suggesting trying to
Yes, I'm being very compassionate. Absolutely. Let them live.
I think that's a problem. I think that sets up a whole new problem.
Friends, the message here is,
And down the road.
friends, the message here is that the Parshas Zachor tells us, like you saying, Mike. Parshas Zachor says you got to eliminate the threats. Parshas Zachor says Hamas itself has got to be eliminated. This is a stated goal of the war. The question is, who is Hamas? So I think what the plan would be to eliminate Hamas entirely, not just the leadership, but the entire Hamas. Right? You got to eliminate them. It's the innocent civilians that you got to let live. Folks, don't call it a day. It's almost Shabbos, you guys. Let's have a great day. Shabbat Shalom, and may we experience Shalom, peace.
Amen.
Not only for the Jews, but peace for the Arabs. These Palestinian children have a right to have a life that's free from forcing them to become terrorists. They have a right to their freedoms. And it's only when we're strong in enforcing freedoms upon them that they have a chance of ever experiencing freedom.
But you know what? You're going to have a problem. Somebody's going to cut